I just want to read you one of Emily Dickinson's poems. The heart is the capital of the mind. The mind is a single state. The heart and the mind together make a single continent. One is the population, numerous enough. This ecstatic nation seek. It is yourself. Thank you. On behalf of the college, and particularly on behalf of the Hampshire Fellows, I thank and welcome as our commencement speaker, Anaïs Nin, writer.
What I want to bring you today are two beautiful words. One, celebration. Celebration of all the gifts that we have and the gifts that we are going to make others with our talents. Celebration of the poet who teaches us levitation. Celebration of the psychologist who teaches us how to center ourselves. Because as you know, when a pot is being made and put on the wheel, unless it's beautifully centered, it falls apart. I'm here to speak about the tremendous value of the inner journey in proportion to the outer journey. And the wider our universe becomes due to science, and the furthest we go, we think we go so far when we go to the moon, the nearer we need to come to the center of ourselves in order to interpret this world, in order to find values, in order to give our life meaning. And if I have found the secret of the refusal to despair, it was because very early, when I suffered from uprooting and what we call a broken home, I found that I had to center everything in myself, not in thinking only of myself, but in making myself a sensitive instrument to relate to others. I love the image of the Thailand people. Whenever they build their home, they build a miniature replica of this home for the spirit, and they call it the spirit house. And I often think of the center of ourself as being the spirit house from which we're going to draw strength to face the outer events. Because if we live only identified to history, only identified to outer events, and if we have no balancing force in some center of ourselves to equalize the pressure, then we collapse when we see the hideous happenings in the world, or when history defeats us or causes pain to other countries. So I'm speaking of this center as the source of strength and meaning in order to connect with the wider world and the wider events and the discoveries of science and all this vastness of the universe which we think we are discovering. But the more we discovered its expanse and its frontiers, the more we knew about the world, the more science gave us, the lonelier we became. And we didn't know why. We became lonely and isolated because we were out of touch with ourself. And ourself is the spirit house, which is going to transform events and enable us to transform it so that they don't destroy us, so they don't destroy our faith. So I place our faith in that spirit house. And I say we carry this around, not as the misunderstood subjectivity which our culture has tabooed as part of an egocentricity, therefore giving ego the wrong definition, because ego is simply the center from which we think and feel and synchronize and integrate ourselves. Once I have given you the spirit house to carry, you can go forth into the world and you can meet the horrors of history or the hypocrisies of politics or whatever it is that gives you despair. You can meet it with an equalizing strength and faith. At least that is my secret. That is what kept me struggling both as a woman and as an artist. And as Cocteau said, we need the poet. I don't know why, but we do need him. And I think I can say we need the poet because he teaches us how to levitate. if we can levitate a little bit above events and not become completely smothered by them, by the daily occurrences, if we really have an existing self with which to transcend events and transcend the things that we cannot bear, for we have heard recently that it is true that it's not only accidents that cause physical states of shock, but it is when the messages that we receive from the exterior, from the outer journey, are too terrible for us to bear. And the only way we can bear them, interpret them, and maintain our humanity is to come back to this personal world, which was a discovery made by women a long time ago. How precious and valuable was the noticing of the person next to you. How precious and valuable was a woman's sense of the value of personal life, and that lay embedded in this vision of the personal life which we thought was limited, the seeds and the roots of our humanism. So it's a great day to celebrate for women, because in women's writing we have discovered always that center of the personal life. And if there were sometimes reproached, as I was, for not dealing with large political issues, it was not only because I knew that I wasn't skilled in that particular field, but that the personal was where the place from which I drew my strength to bear with the external events, to interpret history, and above all, the refusal to despair. So we owe the poet and also the art of levitation, so that we live within history and at the same time capable of living outside of it, capable of creating individually a cell, and the multiplication of these cells. You cannot imagine the extent of the influence that a little cell of a personal, perfect creation in life can radiate in a whole community. For the happy man, the fulfilled man, is a gift to the collective, and an unhappy man is a danger to the collective. And in our culture, we laid stress on the value of the external, the involvement in the external events as being superior to the involvement of our self-discovery. We had a cultural taboo on the development of the self. Here, of course, you have acknowledged this concern with self-development and self-growth, and it is from there that we're going to go into the larger conglomerations, because we forgot that the collective life was nothing but an aggregate of individuals, and that the more value, the more enrichment an individual brings to his life, the greater is his gift to the collective life. And perhaps if we paid attention again to this nearness to our center and the nearness to our spirit house, we might then project onto history perhaps a humanism which we are losing by thinking in terms of great numbers, of masses, of distance. We think that we are expanding our spirit when we consider the space or distance to the moon, but we have much further and many more miles to travel within ourselves to find a self that is sensitive to others, that is receptive to the messages that human beings sometimes pass on to the other and are not heard of. We become sensitive like a camera, like a very, very sensitive machine to receive, captate the feelings, the emotions, the anxieties, and the fears of others. This is a beautiful day to celebrate. It's a wonderful moment in women's history. I think woman is now mutating and beginning to find her selfhood. It's very important that she should do that, because if we don't free all of us simultaneously, we will never know the meaning of freedom. So it's not only the minority groups, it's not only every human being, but that our effort towards liberation, towards freedom, and towards humanism are absolutely made individually. And Lauren Isley said, every victory over our hostility is a step towards peace. So when I make each one of us responsible for the larger events, it is because whatever we create in this tiny personal cell, whatever perfection we can create around us and immediately in our community, is the one that will really project itself on the larger movements of history. Woman was made to feel slightly disparaging, this concern with the personal. But as our world became more and more impersonal, and the news that we received were images which we did not really respond to, because if we could have responded, we couldn't have borne it. The pictures of war and the pictures of injustice, all the things which harass us, the woman's secret for maintaining her emotional life alive was that she centered it on the personal, which means the person who is next to you, the person who calls for help, the person who telephones you in a moment of distress. It means this kind of responsiveness, continuous responsiveness to the needs of other human beings. So we have so much to celebrate. We have our gifts and our skills, and we still have heroes like Nader and Ellsberg. We have heroes and we have women heroines now in the women's movement. And we have women writers who for a long time have told us that to be close and intimate was an achievement in humanity, that the more we shared of the deepest part of ourselves, the less harm we would do, the less destructiveness, the less callousness. We couldn't be indifferent to a person whose life we knew in totality. We couldn't possibly be indifferent to a people whose history we really knew individually and in totality and in depth. And this sharing, which we feared to do, the sharing of our deepest self, for many, many reasons, cultural taboos, because we feared betrayal, because we feared to be misunderstood, because we feared to be judged, is a fear that we now have to shed, because I risked that, and in doing that, I found my human connection with the universal, so that if the personal life is lived deeply enough, it becomes and goes beyond the personal, and it becomes this universal thing of which we dream. That is, when there is a self to receive the sensitivities and the vulnerabilities of others, there has to be a receptive, the existing core, which is able to interpret the messages. So this is how I think of the self, as a highly sensitive instrument, aware that human beings are often in trouble, that they're often in distress, that they need encouragement, that the writers and the artists have shown the great need of having the people with them, that sometimes they have been alone because they have been a little ahead in their vision. And as Edgar Varese said, the artists are really not ahead of the time. The other people are just a little late. So I risked that. I risked taking the mask off and sharing the deepest part of my life with you. And I found that the story of this struggle, the story of this unmasking, the story of taking this risk of being judged and of being misunderstood was really the beginning of our human connection with each other. And we had lost that by thinking in terms, abstract terms, of great themes and vast movements, vast collective thoughts. I don't mean to exclude the other. I mean to relate the two, so that we relate to, as human beings, as individuals, to the trends of thoughts of our time. I mean that we relate with a stronger self and the spirit house to what is happening in history, so that we do not have the total disillusion or the total despair which some students have experienced in dealing with only the presence of history. So I'm giving you today your faith in yourself, your faith in the ability to create a personal world. I don't mean always in terms of art necessarily, but in every form our life may take. Create a house, create a happy child, create a happy dog. Everything is a creation. The will to create. And we need this will to create now more than ever, because when we try to live purely collectively, then we only receive the destructive and the negative messages from the world. Thank you.